Divorced at last. Clinking glasses, he's the one losing everything, face with years of joy. Hashtag freedom looks good on me. That was the caption under the photo of my wife holding a champagne flute, wearing sunglasses, and grinning like she just buried me instead of divorcing me. The post had 74 likes, 11 laughing reacts, and a string of comments from her brunch gang, all typing variations of finally, and girl, you won. I sat alone in our lake house when I read it. Correction, my lake house. She never noticed the deed transfer a year ago, didn't catch the quiet retitling into the Ironwood Legacy Trust. She thought she was clever, waiting until our 30th anniversary passed, when her attorney said it'd lock in spousal benefits. She didn't know I'd been prepping for this since the day I heard her whisper into her phone, "He's so clueless, I swear." The taste of that post? Like blood on metal. Cold. Rusty. Familiar. Her declaration wasn't a surprise. It was the timing, public, petty, loud. Like she needed the world to watch me bleed. But what she didn't realize was I'd already cauterized the wound and hidden the blade. She was dancing around a corpse she assumed was still twitching. Our son, Jonah, texted me 2 minutes after it went up. "Jonah, what's going on?" "Me, just let her have her moment." He didn't reply. He's 26. Smart kid. He knows how I play long games. You know, it's funny. 98% of people who listen to stories like this never subscribe. But if you're still here, and this opening hit you in the gut, tap that subscribe button. It keeps our team fueled, and it's free. We've got a lot more truth where this came from. Back to Brenda. She thought she was winning. She had the ring light selfies, the girls' night clinks, and some slick-talking gym trainer named Chad giving her backhanded compliments about her mature energy. Meanwhile, I was sipping Glenlivet in a house she couldn't legally enter, watching the show from behind a firewall she didn't know existed. I clicked on her post again, just for the sport of it. One comment from her best friend, Lacey, read, "I hope you cleaned him out, Queen Crown." Clean me out? She didn't even find the vault. Brenda's lawyer must have thought I was one of those sentimental suckers, the kind who fold at mediation, cry in depositions, plead to keep the dog. He doesn't know the kind of man who makes backup copies of backup copies. The kind who labels folders with names like Operation Driftwood and Firebreak Strategy. He doesn't know the kind who sleeps just fine on couches while assets migrate like geese to safer, colder climates. In her mind, the post was a victory lap. In mine, it was her opening move in a game she didn't understand. I logged off Facebook, stood up, and walked to the safe behind the bookshelf. Opened it. The folder inside hadn't been touched in over 6 months, everything inside still pristine. Trust documents, timeline logs, transactions predated and notarized. In one particular envelope, marked, "For Brenda, in case of emergency delusion." She'd think she was taking everything, but she was about to learn. You can't steal from a man who already gave it all away. Just not to you. It started with a laugh. A soft, low laugh I hadn't heard from her in years, at least, not directed at me. I'd fallen asleep on the recliner in the den after my back flared up again. Brenda was in the kitchen on speakerphone. She didn't know the hallway carried sound like a confession booth with the door cracked. "I mean, he still thinks we're just going through a phase." Pause. Laughter. "No, I swear. He asked me if I wanted to go up to the cabin next weekend. Like, romantic getaway vibes." Another pause. And then, "Well, if you play your cards right, I might bring you instead." She giggled like a teenager. I laid perfectly still. When she finally went to bed, I waited. 10 minutes. Then 20. Then I got up, silent as a graveyard breeze, and walked to the office. Sat down at the desk. Booted up the old laptop. Opened a folder I hadn't touched since I'd stopped doing side consulting years ago. Renamed it Contingency Plan A. You don't reach 63 without collecting a few friends and a few mistakes. I had both. What I lacked in passion, I made up for in process. That night, I opened our tax returns from the last 10 years. Ran numbers. Cross-checked asset titles. Looked at the Roths, the IRAs, the land in Arizona that appreciated quietly while she bragged about quartz countertops and spa energy. The next morning, she kissed me on the cheek. "You should shave today," she said. I looked her dead in the eyes and smiled. "Yeah, you're right. I think I'll do that." Then I called Carl. Carl served with me back in '89. Now he wears tailored suits and whispers into the ears of dying men with wealthy regrets. Estate law. Quietly powerful. A professional cleaner of financial fingerprints. I asked if we could meet. He didn't ask why. 2 weeks later, I sat in his office as he slid a legal pad toward me. This is everything you need to move. Piece by piece. Legally, cleanly, and without triggering marital asset flags. You'll need patience. I just nodded. Carl leaned back. How bad is it? I looked out the window. She thinks I don't know. He chuckled. Then she's already lost. Over the next year, I became a ghost in my own house, pleasant, predictable, boring. Brenda could have her girls' nights, her brunches, her late-night Zoom calls. Meanwhile, I moved our non-liquid assets into 2 different irrevocable trusts, one under a corporate name, the other under a philanthropic LLC that listed me as a non-compensated advisor. Technically, I no longer owned our cabin, the lake house, or the land in Flagstaff. I was just affiliated. She bought new curtains and joked about our retirement plans. I attended every dinner. I smiled when she smiled. I cleaned up the dishes. And every time I looked at her, I wondered, is she waiting for the right moment or the right lawyer? Either way, I was ahead. I started keeping a handwritten ledger in a black moleskine journal. Every step, every file moved, every name involved. I documented it like a crime scene log. Because someday, someone was going to ask, when did you know? And I wanted to be able to point to the exact second. It was the moment she called me safe. She said it during a phone call I overheard months later, again on speaker, again while she thought I was asleep. He's not exciting, she told someone. But he's safe. He'll never leave. She was right about one thing. I didn't leave. I just quietly started building the exit for her. The cafe was one of those places where everything looked like it was trying too hard to be casual. $19 avocado toast, string lights at noon, waiters with PhDs and passive aggression. Brenda fit right in. She wore sunglasses indoors and a coral scarf that didn't match the weather, laughing over her second mimosa with Lacey and Janine. Somewhere between the Eggs Benedict and another round of girl power affirmations, she dropped the bomb like it was a punchline. He's going to cry when he sees what I'm asking for. Chairs creaked with laughter. Lacey practically spit her grapefruit spritzer. Are you serious? What did your lawyers say? Brenda smirked. That with our marriage length and his income history? I could practically own him. She scrolled through her phone and showed them a picture of Chad, shirtless, tan, the kind of man who looked like he charged by the hour and preferred mirrors to books. This is who I really deserve, she said, with that smug undertone of someone who thinks they've just unlocked the cheat code to life. They all nodded like cult members. Validation was thick in the air. No one asked where Chad lived, what he did besides fitness coaching, or how he felt about being the arm candy of a woman pushing 60 with a high-maintenance wine habit and a closet full of unpaid Nordstrom cards. Meanwhile, 3 hours north, I sat in the cabin with a French press and a manila folder. No response needed yet. I told Carl over the phone. She's coming in loud, he warned. That's what I was counting on. I sipped my coffee. Brenda may have had mimosa confidence, but I had bank statements. 4 of them, each from a different institution. Each listing a name she didn't recognize and wouldn't until discovery. If it got that far, there was a time I would have tried to fix us. Therapy, compromise, second chances. But those days were buried under years of being reduced to a wallet with ears. Brenda didn't fall in love with someone else. She fell in love with a fantasy of her life without my shadow. And now she was betting that the courts would do the heavy lifting. Her lawyer, some guy named Darren with too much gel and not enough neck, had sent a preliminary settlement offer via email. It read more like a ransom note. Full alimony, 70% of the community assets, the main house, and joint control over the lake property, which, of course, she didn't know she didn't legally own anymore. He ended it with, "We expect your client will want to resolve this quickly and discreetly." I printed it, pinned it to the cabin wall. I called Carl. Let them think I'm rattled. Let them think I'm afraid of court. Just make sure we don't miss any deadlines. He laughed softly. They think you're stalling because you're emotional. I replied, I'm stalling because I'm organized. Back at the brunch table, Brenda was playing the lead role in her own sitcom. He's just too soft, she told them. I was tired of being bored. I deserve to feel things again. Janine leaned in. What are you going to do once the money's in your name? Brenda twirled her straw. Move in with Chad. Buy something beachside. Maybe even go blonde. They toasted to that. Mimosa number 4. I'm told. She didn't know her name was off the land deed. She didn't know Chad was still technically married, and that his wife, bless her heart, had DM'd me 2 weeks ago after finding Brenda's thirsty selfies in his cloud account. She didn't know the documents she mailed me were being used to time her legal overreach to the second. Brenda thought she was sprinting toward freedom. She didn't realize the bridge she was running on had been hollowed out, beam by beam, by the same man she left behind, reading quietly in a log cabin, sipping coffee, and waiting. Not to react. To strike. Brenda strutted into the courthouse like it was a runway, and she was finally getting her reward for decades of putting up with a dull man in outdated jeans. Her words, not mine. She wore a fitted cream blazer over a silk blouse that probably cost more than my monthly grocery tab, and heels that clicked with every step like a metronome counting down to her imagined victory. Her attorney, Darren the Greaseball, followed behind her carrying a faux leather portfolio, smirking like a man who'd watched too many legal dramas and still thought objection was a magic word. I arrived 5 minutes early. Alone. No entourage. No need. Carl met me at the door and handed me a folder. We're not fighting today, he said. We're clarifying. The courtroom itself was sterile, fluorescent, and smelled faintly of burnt coffee. The kind of place that kills sentiment and leaves only facts. Perfect. The judge, an older woman with glacier eyes and the patience of a sniper, took her seat and glanced over the initial briefs. Brenda smiled wide enough for Instagram. Darren cleared his throat and stood. Your Honor, we'd like to begin proceedings on asset division. My client is entitled to it. Carl rose slowly. Your Honor, if I may. Before we waste the court's time, we'd like to file a preliminary motion to contest the classification of the listed assets. The judge looked over her glasses. On what basis? Carl handed over a thick, stapled document. Many of the properties and financial instruments referenced are no longer marital property, per IRS code and state asset law. We've included all supporting documentation. Darren blinked. I'm sorry. What? The judge skimmed the first page. Her eyebrows lifted half a centimeter, a micro-expression, but deadly. Mr. Sandell, she said to Darren, were you aware that the lake house was transferred to a third-party trust over a year ago? Brenda's head jerked like someone had snapped a rubber band at her temple. We were under the impression, Darren began. You were under the wrong impression, Carl said, calm as a sunrise. The judge held up a sheet. This trust predates the separation by 14 months. Mrs. Templeton was not a named beneficiary. Nor, it seems, did she contribute to its funding. Brenda finally spoke. What does that mean? Her voice cracked on the last word. Not enough for the room to gasp, but enough for me to mark it. First crack in the armor. The judge continued flipping through documents, now visibly more interested. This account here, filed under Ironwood Development. Do you have proof of independent capital injection? Carl nodded. All verified. The LLC was funded entirely through post-tax capital from my client's consulting work, separate from his primary employment, and predates the marriage's dissolution by nearly 3 years. Darren muttered, we'll need time to review. I'll grant a delay, the judge said, tapping her pen. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. In the meantime, both parties are to refrain from making public commentary on the case. This is clearly more complex than presented. Brenda stared at me like I'd set the building on fire. I didn't say a word. Just stood, buttoned my jacket, and gave her a polite nod. The same kind you give a stranger who almost hits your car and pretends not to see. Outside, I took a deep breath. Carl lit a cigarette, offered me one. I shook my head. He grinned. She had no clue, he said. She had brunch, I replied. She thought that was prep. Inside the courthouse, Brenda was hissing at Darren. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew that tone. It was the same one she used when the lawn guy missed a weed patch. That toxic blend of disappointment and disbelief that the universe wasn't bending the way she imagined. The tide hadn't turned. It had just revealed who couldn't swim. Brenda was in her kitchen the next morning, pacing barefoot in designer pajamas, holding her third espresso and texting Chad about finally planning that Aruba trip, when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen. Franklin and Kemp CPA. She answered on speaker while opening her laptop. Franklin, hey. Please tell me you're calling with good news. Like, maybe I'm finally rich enough to buy a house with a yoga studio and a view. A pause. Too long. Just air and background typing. Then, Brenda, you might want to sit down. Her smile froze. I'm fine. What's going on? She said, voice still light, but her body already moving toward the kitchen stool. Franklin cleared his throat. We've started our forensic review, as you requested, cross-referencing all joint accounts and tracking marital assets. But two of the major accounts, well, they're not accessible. Not by you, anyway. What the hell does that mean? She snapped. One of them, ending in 8839, is under an LLC registered in Wyoming. The ownership records list your husband. You're not named on it. At all. Okay, but we opened that account together years ago. That was our joint portfolio. No, Brenda. That was your assumption. The funds were moved, legally, 18 months ago. The account as it exists now is part of a corporate structure, and the structure doesn't list you. Brenda blinked, her laptop screen still loading an email about a sample yoga retreat package in Tulum. I'm sorry, she said slowly, like he hadn't spoken English. I don't understand. That money was restructured, Franklin interrupted, professional but tense, in full compliance with current laws. The other account, the one holding the boat's title, is also tied to the LLC, as is the vessel itself. She froze. The boat. Yes, our boat. Technically, it's his boat now. It's registered under Ironwood Holdings, which again, you're not connected to. Silence. Even the Nespresso machine stopped humming. Her throat clicked dryly. I paid for that damn boat's interior. I picked the name Serenity, remember? I do, he said, with all the emotional tone of a fax machine. But the title changed months ago. We have documentation. It was transferred after evaluation and buyout. Brenda stared at the wall like it had just betrayed her. So I can't access it? No. You have no legal claim to it as of now. The judge may review it, but as it stands. She hung up. The phone clattered on the marble island. She stood there, arms stiff, heart thudding behind her ribs like it wanted to escape the building. A full-body sensation of falling, but with no motion. Just vertigo. She dialed Darren. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Left a voicemail. Call me now. Emergency. Then she messaged Chad. Brenda, change of plans. May need to postpone Aruba. Chad, what does that mean? Brenda, just a hiccup. Long story. Chad, K, gotta train a client. Hit you later. She sat down, hard. Serenity. Gone. The cabin? She hadn't even asked about that yet. Now she was afraid to. The confidence from yesterday, the courtroom glow, the brunch bragging rights, the Instagram drafts with empowered captions vanished like steam on glass, all replaced with a slow-dawning horror. What else had she never owned in the first place? She always believed power came from presence, from being loud, pretty, visible. She never once thought to check the locks on the vault. Never imagined he'd anticipate betrayal before she even dared to execute it. She thought he'd cry in court. She didn't realize he'd already emptied the vault, changed the passwords, and burned the roadmap 2 years ago. Brenda hadn't posted in 5 days. That might not sound like much, but for a woman who once uploaded 3 filtered selfies during a teeth-whitening session, it was practically a disappearance. Her Facebook lay dormant. No inspirational quotes, no starting a new chapter captions, no mimosa boomerangs. Just silence. And silence was loud. She noticed the shift first in her group chats. Messages she once hijacked with play-by-play updates now scrolled on without her. Lacey sent a meme about dating broke men, and Janine replied with LOL and a flame emoji. Brenda added a grinning face with sweat, but no one acknowledged it. At brunch that Sunday, yes, she still showed up. There were 3 seats instead of 5. Lacey avoided eye contact. Janine stirred her coffee like it had secrets. Brenda brought up Chad. The room got colder. You said he was moving in? Janine asked flatly. Brenda straightened her posture. We're just waiting on a few things. Timing, you know. Lacey glanced at her phone. Oh, not a word more. Later, as she walked back to her car, she passed 2 women from the next table whispering. I thought she was the smart one of them muttered. The other replied, guess not. She played herself. Brenda didn't sleep that night. She scrolled through old messages from friends who had once cheered her on. Queen. You go, girl. He's gonna regret it. No, nothing. Like she'd become the cautionary tale no one wanted to admit they used to envy. By Tuesday, even Chad was pulling away. He showed up late, gym bag slung over his shoulder, his shirt tighter than his interest. Brenda greeted him with a half-hearted smile. I was thinking we could look at that place in Del Mar again, the one with the balcony? He shook his head. I've been thinking too. About what? About how you said we'd have a house by summer. Her jaw tensed. I didn't say this summer. You kind of implied it. I didn't imply anything, Chad. You know how divorce works. It takes time. He crossed his arms. It's been time. You said he was finished. You said you were going to clean him out. That last sentence hung in the air like smoke from a blown fuse. She tried to pivot. We can still build something. Build what? He snapped. I thought we were getting something real, not waiting for scraps from your ex-husband's leftovers. She laughed, sharp and defensive. Oh, you mean like you bring something real to the table, Chad? What do you even own? A yoga mat and a motivational playlist. That did it. He grabbed his bag without another word. Just walked out the door and let it slam behind him. She didn't chase him. Instead, she stood in the middle of the living room, her living room, still filled with furniture she used to brag about on Pinterest, and realized for the first time that all her power had been borrowed. Rented, really. And the landlord just called in the debt. She checked her phone. No messages. No likes. No new followers. Just a silence that stretched deeper than the one in her bank account. And somewhere, she knew Harold was watching it all unfold, one layer at a time, without lifting a single finger. Because he didn't need to. She was undoing herself just fine. The mediation room was beige, stuffy, and cold in that deliberate way corporate rooms always are, designed to be neutral, forgettable, and utterly devoid of comfort. Brenda sat on one side of the table, legs crossed, hands folded over a yellow legal pad she hadn't written a single thing on. Her new blouse was one size too tight, trying too hard to project control. Her expression wavered between forced indifference and a simmering panic that hadn't quite decided whether to boil or implode. Harold sat across from her, flanked by Carl and another associate who looked like he could disassemble a 401k with just a stare. No theatrics. No smugness. Just Harold, in a simple blue button-down and wireframe glasses, flipping calmly through a tab folder like he was organizing fishing licenses. The mediator, a tired man with a haircut 2 weeks overdue, opened the session with procedural boilerplate. Brenda didn't listen. She kept glancing at Harold, searching for something. Weakness? Regret? A tell? Nothing. Carl leaned forward. We'd like to begin by presenting a complete timeline of asset restructuring, all legal, notarized, and filed through appropriate channels. Darren blinked. A timeline. Carl slid a binder across the table with the kind of confidence usually reserved for final chess moves. Every financial decision Mr. Templeton made has been documented. You'll find a chronological index starting 2 years ago. That includes property transfers, title amendments, LLC formations, and trust structuring. Brenda's eyes narrowed. This isn't a trial, she snapped. Carl nodded. Correct. But it is a formal mediation, and we are allowed to present the full context surrounding the contested assets. Darren flipped through the binder. His mouth started to open, then didn't. This LLC, he muttered, tracing his finger down a page. You dissolved it? Merged it into the trust? Correct, Harold said, his voice calm, almost bored. 3 months before separation. Independent valuation included. All filings timestamped. Darren looked up. And the cabin? Gifted to our son via a generational skip trust, Harold replied. Filed 9 months before any discussions of separation. The land title was transferred in full. He's the legal owner. Brenda turned sharply toward him. You gave the cabin to Jonah? He met her eyes. No. I protected it from you. There's a difference. Her jaw trembled. You're insane. Carl raised a hand, gently. Mrs. Templeton, let's keep this civil. She whipped toward Darren. You didn't tell me about this. Darren looked like a man who'd walked into what he thought was a poker game and found out it was a firing squad. This wasn't disclosed. We didn't see it on Discovery. Carl smiled faintly. Because you asked for the wrong documents. Harold slid a separate folder across the table. Smaller. Dark green. Brenda stared at it like it might detonate. Inside, receipts for legal consultations dating back 2 years. Title histories. Asset withdrawal forms. Trust agreements. And at the top, a notarized letter from their son. Brenda read the first lines and paled. My father told me years ago to prepare for this. I can confirm he discussed every step with transparency and calmness. I was not manipulated or coerced into accepting property. I wanted no part of the financial battle my mother was engineering. She dropped the letter. You dragged Jonah into this, she hissed. Harold looked at her. Flat. Even. Dead calm. No. You did. When you started telling people I was losing everything. The room fell so quiet you could hear Darren swallow. The mediator cleared his throat. Given the substantial documentation presented, I'd recommend we take a short recess before discussing terms of settlement. Brenda didn't move. She stared at the stack of papers in front of her, like if she looked hard enough, the numbers might change. The years might unspool. The trust might dissolve. Her fantasy might return. But the truth was there, black ink on cold paper. Harold hadn't reacted. He'd anticipated. He'd built a fortress while she was building a narrative. And now the moat was filled, the drawbridge lifted, and her leverage drowned in paperwork she never thought to ask for, until it was far too late. Brenda hadn't been to the old house in weeks. After the mediation debacle, she'd holed up in a rental condo near the strip mall, telling herself it was temporary until the courts sorted things out. She left the shutters closed, spent hours rage-refreshing Zillow listings, and had wine delivered like it was oxygen. But something snapped that morning, something brittle and feral. Maybe it was the silence from her lawyer. Maybe it was Chad's text the night before that read, "Think we should take a break?" Or maybe it was the dream she had, where Harold stood in the foyer of the house, smiling while she pounded on the locked glass. So she drove there. The hedges were trimmed, the lawn mowed. There was a new wreath on the door, something seasonal and cheerful, and it pissed her off. She stomped up the walkway like she still owned the foundation beneath it and rang the bell. Nothing. Then footsteps. The door opened. A woman in her 30s stood in yoga pants, holding a toddler on her hip. A man approached from behind her, carrying a box labeled garage stuff. Both looked surprised, but not scared. "Can I help you?" the woman asked politely. Brenda blinked. This is my house." The woman smiled awkwardly. "Oh, you must be the previous owner. I'm so sorry, we closed on it last week." "What?" The man stepped forward, friendly but firm. "We bought it from a private trust. Name was Ironwood. We didn't know the previous owner would be stopping by." Brenda's heart started pounding. "No, this house is in my name," she said, pulling out her phone like it could prove her identity, her past, her right to be there. "There must be a mistake." The woman adjusted the toddler. "We have the deed in our paperwork. Everything's clear. Maybe you should talk to your realtor?" Brenda didn't answer. She didn't have a realtor. She turned around, practically ran down the walkway, and sat in her car with her hands shaking. The dashboard clock glowed 11:14 a.m. She scrolled through her contacts. Called Harold. He answered on the second ring. "Brenda." Her voice trembled. "What did you do?" He didn't ask who it was. Didn't ask what she meant. He just said, calm as ice melting on stone, "It was never yours, Brenda. Check the deed history." Then he hung up. No anger. No gloating. Just a clean, surgical response that landed harder than a scream ever could. She pulled up the county property records on her phone. Found the address. Clicked through. The name on the deed? Ironwood Legacy Trust. Transfer date: 8 days ago. Authorization signature: H. Templeton, trustee. She dropped the phone in her lap. The house she bragged about for years. The kitchen she remodeled. The wine cellar she curated bottle by bottle. The custom tile backsplash she made Harold install twice because the blue was too blue. Gone. Not contested. Sold. To strangers. She sat there for over an hour, engine off, barely blinking. The neighbors walked their dogs past her like she was a parked delivery van. No one waved. In her head, the narrative cracked like glass. No house. No cabin. No boat. No Chad. No brunch gang. No Instagram applause. Just her. Alone. Watching everything she assumed was permanent slip quietly, permanently out of reach. One lock at a time. The meeting was in a law office that smelled like dust, leather, and inevitability. Brenda arrived 10 minutes early, maybe for the illusion of control, maybe out of pure anxiety. She wore a scarf even though it was 76 degrees outside. Her makeup was lighter than usual, the kind women put on not to impress, but to hide the color of defeat. She was led into a glass conference room with a carafe of untouched water and 2 neat stacks of paper at the center of the table. Harold was already there. No smile, no smirk, just a nod. The same kind he used to give when someone said thank you for something simple he'd done out of quiet responsibility. Brenda sat. Carl didn't speak first. He didn't need to. The paperwork said it all. Final settlement. No spousal support. No joint assets awarded. No residual claims. She'd keep her Lexus, leased in her name, and whatever remained in her checking account, a balance that now sat barely above 5 figures thanks to 2 months of inflated confidence and a few desperate attempts at lifestyle maintenance. Her attorney whispered, "We can contest this. There's still a path." But his voice sounded unsure, tired, like even he wanted to move on. Brenda flipped to the last page and stopped. There, bolded just above the signature line, was one final clause. A personal edition, handwritten in legal ink. All public statements, posts, and media referring to Mr. Templeton must be deleted within 72 hours of signing. Failure to comply will nullify all settlement terms. She blinked. "You can't be serious," she muttered, looking up at Harold. "You want me to erase everything?" He nodded once. Every caption, every hashtag, every champagne glass victory selfie. Her throat tightened. Those were my words. And now they're your price." The silence in the room was suffocating. Not tense, not dramatic, just heavy, like it had weight and gravity. She stared down at the pen in front of her, lifted it. Her hand hovered for a moment, fingers trembling like they might still find a miracle in hesitation. There wasn't one. She signed. Her attorney said something she didn't register. Carl gathered the documents. Harold stood up. No handshake. No farewell. Just a glance at her, neutral, unreadable, and then he walked out the door with the papers in hand and the future he'd already secured waiting in his car. Brenda remained in her seat for a long time. When the receptionist gently poked her head in to let her know they needed the room, she nodded numbly and gathered her purse. Outside, the sky was overcast. Not stormy. Just dull. She sat in the Lexus and opened Instagram. One by one, she deleted them. The post with the "divorced at last" caption. The filtered selfie with "he's losing everything, I'm gaining peace." The one with chat on the beach that said, "finally living the life I deserve." Each one disappeared with a hollow tap. Each one felt like it took a piece of her with it. And when she finished, she stared at the empty feed and realized she had posted a version of herself that never actually existed. And now, even that was gone. The birthday party was in the backyard of Jonah's modest home, nothing extravagant, just folding tables, paper streamers, a store-bought cake shaped like a fire truck. The kind of event where people bring crockpots and paper plates, not hidden agendas. Brenda stood near the punch bowl in a navy sweater she hadn't worn since before the divorce. She smiled politely at relatives, complimented potato salad she didn't eat, and stayed on the periphery of every photo. But no matter how far she hovered from the action, she kept glancing toward the gate. And then he walked in. Harold. Same calm posture, same quiet eyes. Holding a medium-sized gift bag wrapped in red, nothing flashy. Just intentional. Jonah spotted him first. "Dad." They hugged. It wasn't performative, it was real. That alone stung more than anything Brenda had prepared for. The guests watched. Everyone knew the story, or at least their own version of it. What they didn't know, yet, was how it ended. Harold bent down to his grandson and handed over the bag. "This one's from Grandpa," he said. The boy tore it open, a carved wooden train set, polished and handmade, initials etched into the base. Brenda's eyes flickered. He made it himself, she thought, before she could stop herself. Jonah stepped beside Harold and slipped him a slim folder. "This is for the trust you set up," he said quietly. "Just some updates from the accountant. Thanks for thinking ahead." Harold nodded. "Always." Brenda watched, unmoving. Her mouth parted slightly, wanting to speak, but unsure which version of herself would be heard if she did. Harold opened the folder. On top was a printed letter. She couldn't read it, but Jonah had. "To my grandson and any future heirs. This trust ensures that what I built remains within this family. Not to be picked apart by strangers, not diluted by temporary interests. It's not about punishment. It's about protection. Your legacy should be earned, not gambled away." Brenda didn't blink. The wording wasn't cruel, but it landed like a scalpel. No direct mention of her. No revenge-laced threats. Just a clear boundary drawn with surgical precision. She realized, standing there with a paper cup of warm lemonade, that she hadn't just lost the house or the boat or the nameplate marriage. She'd lost the future. The story she thought she was still part of. Harold knelt to hug his grandson, whispered something that made the boy giggle, and stood up to leave. He didn't look at her. Didn't say goodbye. He just walked out through the same gate he'd walked in through, quietly, deliberately, as if he hadn't just delivered the final chapter in front of a live audience. Brenda stood alone, surrounded by conversations that didn't include her. The party carried on. Streamers fluttered. The cake was sliced. And somewhere in the noise, she heard the echo of her own voice months ago. He's the one losing everything. But now, no one was laughing. Not even her.